And we're back for another one. And we have changed up some of the theme of what we're going to be discussing because we're talking a little bit about legacy. We had a little bit of a discussion last time, which was about the idea of one of our biggest fears, which is not being around for our kids. So then this shift of being able to discuss this area of what our kids would ask us and come up with some ideas and maybe leave something for them. So naturally, we have people that we're able to connect with now. And if you're tuning in, thank you for tuning in for another episode. But we also want to be thinking about our kids. Like if our kids ask about a certain question about us or about life or about them, about society, we want to maybe proactively think about what they might ask and proactively provide answers in case we're ever not here, so that they can have some of our perspective as parents to them. But we did find out if you're having a boy or girl, is everybody in podcast land, the one person listening, ready to find out if Aimee's having a boy or girl?
Yeah.
Now, you've already revealed this on your side.
Yep.
On where'd you post it?
I posted on Facebook.
Okay. All right. So,
and my Instagram, I think.
All right. So let's see if we can jump off with the video of the reveal. All right, there you go. And
baby buttercup, you ready?
What do you want to do it with you?
Yeah,
How do we
okay.
do it?
Hello, do you want to do it too?
Okay.
Okay. You ready?
We just put it in and then take it back out?
Yeah. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3. It's a boy! Yeah. Hello.
Yep.
We're gonna have a little baby brother.
Kalel escaped the frame.
Yeah. He took off running.
Oh, he's clapping.
Show him clapping.
At this point, he was like, I
Hello,
don't
hello.
care. I don't care about the new baby sibling.
Like this.
He says, nope, not clapping for him anymore. He got 3 claps. That was it.
It was such a good shot too. Your artistic ability is coming out.
Khalil said,
Okay.
nope, this is over.
There we go.
Done. We don't need to see no more of that.
All right. How are you feeling knowing that it has been revealed and you are no longer holding on to this secret?
I'm super glad. I'm excited because, you know, since we already have a boy, it was like, oh, do we start buying more clothes? Like, do we buy more, like, specific clothes? You know,
Yeah.
because a lot of the stuff that I have, I kept everything from when Kala was a baby. So it's like, we're like, they didn't want it to know. Like, are we going to have to get rid of all of that and start all over? Or what are we going to do? So now I really don't like shopping. So, like, I can't stand shopping around. So once we found out we were having another boy, I was like, oh, thank goodness. I'm not going to have to shop for for a girl, which is great. Not to say that at some point in time, the boys are not going to want to go pick out clothes. But Jeremy doesn't mind doing that. So that's great. Boy things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer to do it from the comfort of my couch on the phone.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, that's definitely a convenient thing. So were you able to keep it 100% a secret and not let it slip at all with anybody?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, nobody knew until right then and there. People were taking guesses, which is funny because they would be like, oh, because we're going to have to go start buying more clothes. And then they look at me. Or like, you know, stuff like that. Or are you going to get rid of all your Kalal's clothes? And then they look at me again. I'll be like, okay.
And if you're just tuning in, we just found out Aimee will be having a baby boy due December. Very excited about that. We're excited about being able to meet the new baby Barajas. Do y'all already have a name? And is
We
it a
do
secret?
not have a name yet, which is, kept telling Jeremy that we need to decide on a boy name because I don't want to be waiting until the last minute. But Grandma was like, oh, y'all have plenty of time. So I'm like,
Do you
nervous.
are you still gonna harbor the secret of the girl name that you were gonna use?
Probably.
It will go with you to the grave.
Yeah, I don't want anybody that I know to like steal it, and then they have a baby within the next 2 or 3 years, and then they name them the same name, and then I don't have another baby for 5 years, and then I have a girl, and then it's like copycatter.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, crazy. Now we're gonna have another boy. We don't have a name picked out, but we're not like. So Jeremy's brothers, they all have the initials JLB. Well, like, it's like his dad. His initials are JLB. Then Jeremy's and his 2 younger brothers also. And I wasn't sure if we were gonna like stay on the same theme, like with Kalel. So I had been trying to come up with a bunch of J names, but now Jeremy's making all these J suggestions, and I'm like, well, we can't do it now because we've already not done it in the first.
So J is out?
J is out, especially because I made the suggestion for like 100 different good J names, and he's like, nope. So I told him that I'm not agreeing on any J names now. But we did keep the still like Kalel's is KLB, so we might. I'm trying to think of K names, but
Now, each couple naturally will have a different decision process that they use for anything in life. Now, for me, in naming our kid, which we still don't have a name for our son, who's coming in September, we're 2 months away. I chose, again, as somebody who makes the final decisions if we're ever not able to put this categorically in what I call the missile launch decision, meaning both of us have to put the keys in, turn so that the missile launches. I didn't have to do that, but I extended this as a courtesy to my wife so that we both actually like and agree on the name. And so that's the period we're in right now. We both actually have to like and agree. Now, for you and Jeremy, is it a missile launch category?
yeah, we
method on this?
we definitely both have to agree. Yeah, I mean, really, at the moment, the day of, I don't know if I've explained it before on the pod, but I have said it like to people in the past, like when Jeremy and I were in the hospital, I don't think I signed any papers. Like I don't have any recollection of signing any papers or doing anything.
Yeah.
Jeremy did all the birth certificate paperwork. So really, ultimately, he could have named Kalel whatever he wanted.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But he didn't. So
Well, good. All right, so let's pivot into.
we're not naming him LeBron. For anybody who knows my husband, don't listen to him if that's what he says to you.
What about Bronson, son of Braun?
No.
I feel weird about any name with son in it because it's like son of Johnson, son of John, or Bryson, son of Bryce, or whatever. And there's not really a Derek son, so all that to say is, yeah, son in the name, not really feeling it for our kid. If somebody's out there who has the name already, do your thing, rock with it. But we're not going to be doing that in this household.
Yeah, names are a hard thing because you don't ever know like what kids are going to come up with.
Yeah. Okay. Let's pivot into the discussion on questions or things you want your sons at this point to know, and things that I would want my sons to know. And we'll get a chance to come up with our own questions. Even I think that's going to be a major theme going forward in the pod is coming up with questions that we each want to answer that our kids might ask one day. And we want to be kind of have them have the fancy word is repository of input from their parents.
That
if
doesn't
ever.
sound like a nice word.
Repository.
Yeah, it reminds me of another word.
What's the other word? Depository. Is it the way?
Suppository.
And which one is that? Is that the one you put in your backside? Okay, yeah. So you don't like the rhyme, the association.
Yeah.
Well, if you knew both words in Spanish, most likely they wouldn't rhyme anymore. That's what I tell myself whenever a word has a bad association. I'm like, if you know both words in another language, most likely they don't have the same association anymore.
Yeah.
Only in English they have a rhyming
rhyme.
element. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So they have a
Time capsule.
a capsule of advice their parents want to give to them. Do you want to go first? Of course, we're also simultaneously reading a personal growth book.
Yeah.
We just read The Law of the Mirror, which has a lot to do with self-esteem and confidence.
Yes.
So do you want to go first on the question you want to answer or pose or something you want your sons to know from you?
Yeah. So, like, if I'm not here, I feel like one of the questions that my sons might ask is like, were you a good person?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I myself am like thinking, one, like, how do you explain that? One, in general, like, as a parent, if I'm standing here and my kid asks me, Mom, like, are you a good person? I would say, like, you know, I don't automatically want to, like, be overly, like, not humble. You know what I mean? I don't want to be like, yes, I'm the best person out here, duh. Like, obviously, that's something that I might say.
Do you know how lucky you are to have me as your mom?
Yeah, but it's like, you know, I do feel like if they came and they asked me, you know, do you think you're a good person? What do you think makes you a good person if you think that you are? I think I'm constantly trying not to hurt other people's feelings. I'm trying to work towards making myself better for, you know, to help other people, to help not only, you know, my kids, my family, my friends. I think what makes you a good person is when you're able to empathize with people around you and make physical changes to the parts of you that need that kind of growth, you know, like exactly how we've been talking about it. Like, if you can continuously try to grow as a person, like internally, and understand that, like, if you make a mistake about something, you can make it up. You can't just automatically say, like, oh, I'm a bad person, I did a bad thing, that's it for the rest of my life, I'm a bad person. Then you continuously make bad choices. That's what makes you a bad person. I think what makes you a good person is if you do make these mistakes and you try to genuinely work towards changing yourself and moving forward. I think that's what I try to do, you know, like trying to do the right thing, trying to pursue the right ideologies in myself and in life, just to continuously progress and be able to not only help myself but help other people too.
Right. So then your perspective, so that would be maybe your guidebook onto becoming a good person, which was, you mentioned ideology, become better. You can make mistakes, but you can move forward. Okay. No, that makes sense. That's helpful. That's a helpful perspective. Yeah. And I'll answer that question too, because I think that wasn't on my list as far as questions that I would answer. No, and it makes sense too. Like, how do you quantify such an answer? Sometimes, even when I was younger, especially in high school, I thought, can you go and think through your good deeds outweighing your bad deeds? How would you weigh, you know, each one?
Yeah.
Okay, I yelled at my mom. Is that a -1 or a -1,000? Is it and how do you categorize something good that you do? Okay, well, I helped, I stopped as somebody who had broke down on the highway and gave them a ride to wherever they needed to go. Is that a +1 or is it a +1,000? Again, so it's kind of interesting when you think about like all good deeds and bad deeds. I think naturally, again, Christian lens, I think about this, if my son one day wonders if I'm a good person, I was like, yeah, I've done bad things, I've done good things. Now, there's absolutely been times in my life where I was so involved with the community, I could see how it could look like it was good. But then, again, there's absolutely times most of our bad things, again, if we're not publicly confessing our stuff, nobody even really knows about how bad things are. You know, I know you and I have talked about even your situation with, again, you know, stabbing this girl. Again, categorically, I could see how somebody goes, okay, that's like whatever, negative,
Yeah.
you know, a million, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and again, like, how do you come back from that or whatever? Like, but all of that to say is, I would say, son, if you're asking me in regard to kind of trying to understand you themselves as a person, are they good? The Christian perspective, I think, is I don't actually have to be a good person, because part of saying, hey, Jesus, like, I need you to redeem me. Like, and I have no value by myself, but Jesus, with his perfection, what Christians ultimately believe is that we clothe ourselves with Christ, or we're baptized into him. And that means that when God looks at us, he's not seeing all the wrong that I've done, but he's seeing the perfection of Jesus over us that I'm clothed with. So there's this, it's a beautiful imagery, I think, of I don't have to walk around feeling guilty. I don't have to walk around being ashamed. There are things that I've done that I absolutely am guilty of. There's things that I've done that I absolutely should be ashamed of. And I think shame and guilt have their rightful place in the human experience. But if I was talking to my son and saying, okay, if he's feeling he's not good enough, that's a perfect place to begin to pursue Jesus and ask, and again, when you're baptized, when you're clothed with Christ, when you're immersed into him, you don't have to be good. And so then we're like saved, not because of all the good things that we do. We're not going to heaven because, oh, look at all the good things that I've done. Yeah, if you looked at my good things, you might go, oh yeah, like he's volunteered in prison, or he's stuff with the homeless, or he's done stuff with the battered women's shelter. Yeah, those are good things that I've done. Yes. And you go, all right, but he's punched people in the face. He's left people bruises. He's been disrespectful. He's cursed and lied. He's all of these things. You'd go, okay, he's a villain. You know what I'm saying? He's a monster. So all of that to say is, and in the Christian perspective on grace, is grace, if you and you understand that, teaches us to say no to ungodliness. So there's a trope in that word. It could sound fancy, but it's like a common storyline or narrative that people paint of a person. There's a trope that's false. There's a false trope within Christianity, especially from people on the outside. They say something like this. They'll say, Christians do things because they're afraid of not going to hell. Like, and that's an immature way to look at what Christians do. Ideally, Christians are taught by grace to say no to bad things. That means there's so much goodness. There's so many good reasons to do good things. There's so many good reasons to say no to bad things, that it's not just, hey, I'm fearful of going to hell, so I'm not going to do bad things.
Yeah.
All that to say is, I probably try to let them know, like I would say I'm not a good person, and I don't have to be because of Jesus, but God sees me as a good, perfect person, and then I'm therefore motivated to do good things for people around me.
Yeah.
So a lot less pressure to perform, but I think it's like a pure motive of like love to perform.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I like that. Any other thoughts before we go to the next one?
Nope.
All right. Shall I go for mine? And I'll base it on something from this chapter of
The book.
the book, and it's a question. Maybe it's the upside down question of, hey, what makes you happy in life, but also what makes you miserable. So if my son came to me one day and asked, or if my son asked, what limits happiness, and there's a quote, I forget if it's in this book or not, but it's a common one when it talks about comparison is the thief of joy. And it's on page 42. It talks about stop comparing yourself to others. I don't know if our books are totally aligned. Yeah, I guess they are.
Yeah.
Stop comparing yourself to others. So that's such an interesting trap, I think, to get into when I find myself more miserable, less happy, less fulfilled. And it's when I find myself comparing myself to other people. and not really having a frame of reference. Even like, let's say if I said, all right, well, let me compare myself to who has the most Instagram followers, or whatever, then it's like, okay, well, Bronny on day one of Instagram had a million. And you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so then if my comparison is to that, then hey, I feel like I'm always going to lose. But if the comparison isn't to somebody else, and I've played around with the thought, I haven't landed on the idea of what happens when you compare yourself just to yourself from yesterday. Is that a good threshold? I haven't landed on that one yet, but I think comparing absolutely can be a way to make yourself miserable, because most of the time we don't have to compare ourselves. And I'm competitive, so we think about the scoreboard a lot, and you're all often thinking about the scoreboard of life or who's winning in the scoreboard. But that's when it comes up to me. Any thoughts on comparing yourself to others?
I mean, it's hard not to want to compare yourself to others. I feel like just in everyday, like doing anything, especially like as a girl, especially in the things that we have going on like right now, I feel like people are constantly comparing themselves to others, and that's why people are working towards, doing diets, or, making sure they have their makeup done, or making sure they're wearing the right outfit, or making sure that they're, doing the right things. I feel like when you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, I feel like even just walking down the street, like I've heard women say like, oh, when I see another woman, I'm constantly thinking like, oh, like, she has a really big butt, but, her waist is not that thin. It's like you're constantly doing these things, even like subconsciously. And I think that those kinds of things I don't think that they're positive. I don't think that they help you like in any way, shape, or form to feel better about yourself. I think some people do tend to put, especially like if you are doing this comparing thing all the time, I feel like it can easily turn into like putting other people down, and then, like, I'm sure that everybody knows those people who constantly have to put other people down just to make themselves feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the kinds of like seeds that get planted, like when you are comparing yourself to someone else, like the seeds that are getting planted is like, eventually this is going to turn into you being comfortable putting other people down to lift yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely don't think that that's healthy. I think it's very harmful.
Right. I think it's kind of interesting too, because I think you can always find someone that you're better than. So like if I really wanted to feel good about my basketball skills, and I say, okay, well, let me go play against these elementary kids. I'm going to beat all of them and I feel really good about myself. But it's like, wait, what really is that? But you probably could always find somebody that is also better than you. Again, most of us are going to find people on both sides of the spectrum. I saw the other day somebody was talking about LeBron James. They were saying, I could beat LeBron James one-on-one. They're like 30 years ago, because LeBron was 9 years old. But eventually, but probably like LeBron at 10, 11, so I probably could still beat them. But you think about like even the best of the best of the best, either when they were really young, they could have been beaten by almost any high school, varsity player. And then also when they're really old. When you get old, then you can't compete with the young guys anymore, and they're going past you. So then like even the best of the best, the idea of being challenged because you cannot compete with the young people anymore, or when you're young you can't compete with the old people. So anyway, it seems like a recipe for disaster if you base everything on comparison. I've heard one concept though where the idea is comparison is good, and if you could be sober with your comparison and you're trying to understand how you fit in the world and what unique gifts you can contribute, you ask yourself, what do I seem to have a natural advantage in, to figure out what gifts that I do have. Because it's so typical that we would go, everybody's as good as me in speaking or writing or communicating or encouraging. But the reality is we're so individually crafted. So we can wrongly assume that everybody's like us when actually they're not.
Yeah, that makes sense too. As far as like comparing yourself to the person that you were yesterday, I think that's difficult also.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's like
I think so too.
if you compare yourself to the person, especially if you're the kind of person who like has fallen off of like doing things as much as you used to, like someone says like, oh, I used to go to the gym 7 days a week. Now I go once every 7 weeks, you know? So then it's like, okay, if I'm comparing myself to the person I was yesterday, like, or, you know, metaphorically yesterday, you know, whatever point in time, it's like, I'm really not doing great right now, you know? But
Yeah.
it's like, you know, those kinds of things. Or even like, you know, even professional players, you know, like eventually they're going to reach an age where it's like, okay, well, you can't continuously, sometimes you're going to reach a peak on something and that's it. Was your peak on like the highlight of your athletic ability,
Yes,
the
yes, yes,
highlight
yes,
of
yes.
your
That's good.
ability to do certain things, even intellectually, you know, like for a long time you can be doing a million things at one time in your brain and like, you know, doing all this work, staying up late, getting work done, but it's like you reach a point where it's like, okay, I can't do that anymore.
Right.
But I think it is healthy to just try to build yourself up just in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that's a great point because all of us go through some kind of a cognitive decline, a physical decline. Naturally, there's some supplements or chemicals you could put into your body like TRT. You know, I wonder about that. Like I was thinking about the idea of taking it isn't foreign to me. I see myself on it one day, and I even got the prescription for it. But the idea is you do supposedly your sperm count reduces if you're on it, which means if you're trying to have kids or more kids, then you shouldn't be on it. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know how many kids we're gonna end up having overall, but if we are gonna try for more, I want to be prepared for that. So let's not be on it soon, soon. So let's say the next 7 years I'm not on it, but after those 7 years, my son is 6, and then he sees his dad, like whatever, buff as a 44, 45-year-old. Again, that's cool for a moment, but if he's like, oh, I want to get big like that, well, maybe he could, maybe he will, but there's also a possibility without the chemicals, he won't.
Yeah.
You know, so again, I saw this guy at AGB the other day. He must have been 60s, but like super like buff, and I was like, there's no way, there's no chemicals involved because his hair is too gray, his face is too old for those muscles to be that sculpted.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, there has to be chemicals there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like so big that they were fake, but they were just so sculpted that I was like, yeah, there has to be some kind of chemicals involved here.
Yeah. It's funny, like, I've thought that before too. Like I told Jeremy, like, Jeremy and I have talked about it before, and we've talked about like certain people are just built a certain way, you know, like some people in their genetics, they're going to naturally be able to look more, like look bigger, you know what I mean? Look bigger. Some people are naturally like thin, so no matter how much they work out, they're never going to be able to get that bulky unless they do like the chemicals or they, do all that stuff. So it's like, I'll tell Jeremy, like, do you think that person or like, you know, somebody that we knew or somebody that we, even like famous people, like, do you think that they just like, you know, started taking creatine or like, you know, did something natural to get or do you think they just started working out? And he's like, no, for sure they had to take something because like their body build wasn't like that. So it's like, you know. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, like as I go along with life, I see different friends and then I see different body types. Again, like as a 38-year-old, you've had the different friends that I've had that have lifted weights and they're so like different sizes. And like one of my friends, like he's just like naturally, he's like in his 50s, but naturally just massive. And I go, oh, if he's natural, then I could understand how other people could also potentially be natural, but nobody believes them. Mm-hmm. And so there's this idea on that as well.
Yeah. But is it like, has he always kind of been like that?
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So to me, that's where you can sometimes be more on point with like your guessing.
Yeah. All right, your turn on whether from the book or an insight you think you want your sons to know.
So
what's the question? What's the theme? What's the topic?
I know it's super like far in the future, but like, okay, let's say I'm not here. Something I want my kids to know, something I would hope that they pay attention to is always be the encouraging voice in your child's head. You know, like always make sure that
For your grandkids.
Yeah, for your grandkids, for my grandkids.
Yeah.
I always want, because the same thing, like when I think about me personally, I feel like growing up, I didn't hear negative speak into me, like poured into me as a child, like from mom. Like if I think about like mom saying something to me, I never ever think about mom saying like, you're not doing that good. I don't know if you can do this. And never doubt. I don't feel like mom ever put doubt in my head. I don't feel like she ever made me feel like I wasn't capable of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I want to do that same thing. I want when Khalil thinks about in the future, when he's going to do something, he thinks like, what would my mom say? My mom would say, yes, you can do it. Yes, you're going to be able to do it. You're going to do amazing. You can do this as perfectly as you want. All you have to do is keep trying. It's like I constantly want, when he hears my voice in his head, for it to always be encouraging. So I want for him to also, for my kids, both of them, in the future, I want them to constantly be that person for not even just their own kids, but like for everybody. Because I feel like mom's been that person not only for her kids, but for other people in her life at any other points in time as well. So I feel like I constantly want to be that person that believes in people and says things. And when they think about me, they think about the encouraging things I say. Same thing, I want to do that for my kids, and I want them to be able to do that for other people as well.
Is there a limitation to that? Is there a way that you might modify that perspective when it comes to maybe a kid who, whatever, 5'4", Mexican, trying to go to the NBA? Is there a point where was that responsibility given to somebody else? Are you gonna let life kind of beat that into somebody? Or what's your perspective on, is there a time to give that
Realistic.
sober perspective? Or you're saying, hey, I'll let life circumstances handle that. He'll get enough of that elsewhere. Is there any limit to that perspective?
Yeah, I do. Especially for like my kids, I do feel like you will get that other places. Like I think, let's say, like you're not that tall, you want to go into the NBA, you're trying, like and it doesn't always necessarily have to be that specific thing. Like, there's so many people. I think, me personally, I think that if you're passionate about something and you want to take any career in any direction, you're able to do that. So let's say you are 5'4", you're Mexican, you're not gonna get very tall, but you're super passionate about basketball. You can go to college, you can go into sports medicine. Maybe one day you can work in the NBA as an announcer, or you can be one of the people who does the coaching, or you do whatever, it's like, or you can even be like a coach, like a private coach, or you can have a league, like all these things. There's so many ways, like if you're really passionate about something, for you to take any career that you're passionate about in that direction. So like, at least that's what I would think, if that's something you're passionate about, something you want to do, I think that, there's no reason to say like, oh, maybe you should be realistic and stop focusing on that. I think if you're passionate about something and you love something, it should definitely be what you pursue a career in. At least my thoughts.
Right. So more so broad category. So like maybe, but you're saying
me as a parent
wouldn't discourage him playing, but you would maybe, what I'm hearing is you would inform him about other possibilities that are within the same window of the industry. So you're saying, hey, like, it's a broad industry. You can be a manager, you could be an agent, you could be a coach, you could be a broadcaster, you can be there's so many different positions other than a player on the court.
Yeah.
So you would make sure his eyes were opened to other opportunities in the industry.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be the one to be like, hey, you're not going to make it as a player.
Yeah. I don't think I would be okay doing that. Like, obviously, if they're not doing it, they're not up to par for it, they're just not going to make it. And that's okay. And that, like, me as a mom, I still will continue to want to be like, yes, you didn't make the team, but there's other things. If you're still passionate about this, there's other things you can do.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's like, where the encouraging continuously needs to come from, not only as me as a parent, but I would want my sons to be able to do for their kids as well. Like, I want them to be able to, like, when something bad does happen, they are able to turn around and continuously say, this isn't the end. You're
Yeah.
still okay. You're still great. You're going to be able to continue to do something else.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting too to think about like the idea of them asking for the opinion. I'm asking myself, if they ask for the opinion of me in an area, do they have a natural gifting or natural advantage to be elite? Then it's kind of, I find myself going, and then also I wonder if is there going to be a difference between a mom and a dad? Like, is there a hard truth that a dad should be delivering where a mom should stay on the, hey, like, not to be a complete trope, but like mom's the cheerleader always cheering on, and then the dad is the coach, like, what the heck are you doing? Like, you're
Yeah.
wrong, you know what I'm saying? Like, where that tough love comes in on the manhood side. But I do like that. So for you, your vision though is how to be that as a parent. So I guess that does go back to this idea though, because you're saying how you want him to be with his kids. Now, what I just broke down was maybe there's a different role
Yeah.
that his wife would play with the kids. Do you? Which actually is going to tie into my next question, but I'll hold on to it for right now. Is there anything you would modify of
About it for
as
men.
far as more so the encouragement coming from his wife and let her being the cheerleader, but I guess you still want him to not be overly negative?
Definitely not overly negative. But, I mean, realistic. I do think that dads should be definitely more realistic. Like,
More hard.
more hard, for sure.
Okay. Got it. All right. Go to mine. We have question if my kid ever asked, what's the difference between boyhood and manhood? Like, what does it actually mean to become a man? And part of that answer would be when you begin to take responsibility and not blame circumstances or people or situations on whatever happens in life. And I'll go Christian on this one as well. And I heard this a long time ago. I remember like one of the first personal development CDs that I had bought, which is crazy to even think about. They probably wouldn't even know what a CD is. A compact disc is something you put into your vehicle. You could hear sounds and music and all these things. So the idea, though, I remember hearing it was this class on how do you become a class act person. And what it is you become somebody who takes full responsibility for anything that happens in your life, which sounds crazy, but it's actually become very, very mainstream when it comes to certain influencers in our day and age in 2024, where people go, hey, if whatever happens, you take full responsibility. Okay, your wife cheats on you, take full responsibility. Your dad isn't there, take full responsibility. Like it's like whatever happens, it's this whole thing. You don't point the finger anymore. So if my son was asking about this idea, it's hey, when you're playing a game and a ref makes a bad call, like there's no use in you blaming the referees after the game on the loss. Did you have a perfect game? Did you miss any shots? Did you let your man score any points? So there's all of these other factors that can contribute to you not being fully accountable and responsible for what happened. And I think about it again, even with baseball, I know we play now, which was if we lost, yes, somebody else might have lost the game winning
point.
out or game winning at bat or whatever it was. But I'm asking myself, did I pitch a perfect game? And the answer is no. Okay, cool. And then conversation over.
Yeah.
Did I hit a perfect game? And even if I did have any of those things that were perfect, did I perfectly prepare my team for excellence on the field? Did I offer an extra practice? Did I offer a helpful input? Did I try to be encouraging? So all of these things come back to me. So I think part of manhood. So if babyhood, if that's a phrase, is everybody's doing everything for you. Hey, they're feeding you. They're clothing you. They're changing your diaper. They're responsible for you. If that's babyhood, manhood is this person is not responsible to feed me, I feed me. Mm-hmm. In fact, manhood going into fatherhood is going, well, not only do I feed me, but I feed my kids. I feed the family. I feed other people. So that transition is I am responsible. I am accountable. I'm not looking for somebody else to fulfill my duties and responsibilities as a man.
Yeah.
Any perspective there?
Man. It's hard also, like, you know, I don't know if, like, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it's insulting to even think, like, also, and tell me your perspective on this, but is there a way to even determine exactly what a man would be considered? You know what I mean?
Break it down.
So, like, something does happen to you, Angelita's alone. Your son is growing up, and he's listening to, let's say, this podcast, and he's hearing some of the things you have to say, but then someone else comes and tells him, you know, you don't even have a dad. How can you say you know that you're acting like a man if your dad's not even here? You know, and that's my perspective. Like, that's my thinking, that's my thoughts, because that's true for so many kids out here. So many young men out here didn't grow up with a dad. So they're like, are they learning from their mom? Are they, you know, do they have videos of their dad even telling them these things? Do they have other men in their life that represent this example? Well, you know, those are the things that I think about that's, like, hard, you know? Like, what do they say? Do they say, like, you know? I don't know.
What do they say in response to that?
Yeah, what do you say in response
What does
to
the
that?
child say when somebody says they don't have a father?
Yeah.
Well, I think my response over the years has shifted, and it's been one, God being a father to the fatherless. So there's this element of, like, this real relationship with God. So if we think about what a father does, a father provides, a father teaches, a father challenges, a father does all these things. So I believe that's what God is doing in my life. But also what God does in my life is he has provided so many men in my life. Like, it's uncountable. I've forgotten names of men who were there for me and showed up for me. And I was like, okay, this coach would pick me. There's a coach, I don't know his name, that would pick me up when I was in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade to go to basketball practice and basketball games. I don't know his name. And but what did he show me? He showed me not just to take care of his, I think, 1 or 2 kids that was on the team, but also, is there a neighborhood kid that we can serve and go pick up so that he can be? That's show. I feel like that was showing me something. Like, it was showing me a fatherhood example of, it's not just about my family, it's also about community, and I want to be that. And then so there's that. There's other coaches that I feel like, you know, Coach Lott, a high school coach, he just showed me that, like, there's an intensity that you could get to with people, and so there's an intensity that can bring out the best in people. Sometimes it's lost in our culture, but I feel like it's still, you see glimpses of it in sports where they're able to yell and scream and tell you, hey, what are you thinking, you know, whatever. Like, this really strong correction that's almost, again, it's almost like a lost art in our world. But I feel like, no, there is a time to, like, raise your voice and express the disappointment or provide new direction to the kids. So all of that to say is, if my son was to be without a dad, I think my perspective would be, 1, God's your ultimate father. 2, praying and looking for how God will fill in gaps of what fatherhood is in the fathers that he'll put around you. Again, I have coaches. I have, again, small things. My grandpa is like, every time we're at his house, he was buying us ice cream from the ice cream truck. It's small. It's a small gesture of him pulling out a wad of money and being able to pay for ice cream. Like, I was like, oh, okay, cool. So when I have kids or grandkids, I want to be able to treat them to a treat,
Yeah.
you know, to an ice cream, to a candy bar or whatever. So all of those things, even so that's a reframe of a perspective.
Yeah.
One perspective was, oh, my dad wasn't around. He wasn't here too much. Another perspective is, God blessed me with so many dads I can't even remember all their names.
Mm-hmm.
So that's any thoughts on that?
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. It's hard for me to think because obviously I'm a girl, right?
So here's a conversation. Maybe I'll throw a question at you from a motherhood standpoint. And maybe this is, you have to think hypothetically about this, or even think about it as a girl, because I find myself wondering, about the idea of when it comes to girls, if I ever have a daughter, I feel like I'd almost be giving her two tracks of life. And I say track, I'm talking two game plans. There's one game plan where it's almost identical to the son, like be fully capable to do everything. But there's this other track of like being submissive that I think is, I define myself trying to help her understand and be prepared to be a great wife for a husband. And in this context, let's say if my wife isn't present to be able to give a lot of these teachings, and so I'm trying to like balance this idea of how do I help her to think through what it's like to be a wife and to almost to be taken care of without the entitlement of like, oh yeah, you got to do this for me. No, but it's like, let's say if she became a stay-at-home mom, there's so much responsibilities that come with motherhood. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm just taking care of every day. Like, no, you are providing all day, every day. You know what the experience is like. Anyway, what's your perspective on raising? So you're raising sons, but then the differences you might have in raising a daughter. What potential things do you think you could see yourself doing differently?
It is hard, to think about, like, how to balance those kinds of things. Like,
because as you're thinking about it, because it doesn't seem like I want to help her to understand she's a princess and people will take care of you and wait on you hand and foot and be a hard worker and be the, again, to the man, I'm like, be the janitor, be the cleaner, be the whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, be that. But then it seems to be you need both. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I think, one, to know what to do, like, educate yourself, like, on things that you are going to need to know how to do. If you are alone and you're not with anybody, you need to know how to, take the trash out every week. You need to know how to put gas in your car, simple things, like all these things that you need to know how to do. But ultimately, I think it's just about finding the person who's going to do that on the front end. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that you can't teach somebody how to do those things. Like, as a girl, right? I feel like the best way for a girl to grow up and find somebody who is all the right things is for her to internally build herself up to be all the right things as well. And that will naturally bring her together with the person that is going to make her life easier. And I think, one, having the ability to do these things, to do simple things, that a man does. So let's say, I have a daughter, she grows up, she buys a house, she owns her house, she's working, she's not been looking for a partner, but, she needs to know how to cut her grass. She needs to know how to call, like, if she doesn't know how to do plumbing and all that stuff, she needs to know how to, one, speak up for herself in front of other men to say, like, okay, I need you to do my plumbing for me, and I need you to do it this way, and I want it done this way. And she needs to know how things work so that if they're doing something wrong or they're doing something, trying to get one up on her, that she is educated internally enough to know, like, okay, you're not going to take advantage of me just because you think that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that will, and I'm not saying, she's going to get all the way to the point where has a house, has a car, works a good job, and she's still not with anybody. She could be dating somebody. But to me, it's like, she should not put herself in a position where she doesn't have everything set up for herself and then expect a man to come in and do everything for her as well. Like, she can't just have not want to be working, not want to be doing anything, just want to stay with mom and dad all the way until she's older, doesn't drive, doesn't know how to do, doesn't know how to call and pay her bills, doesn't know how to call and set up her doctor's appointments, doesn't know how to do any of these things, and then want to get married and leave the house. Like, okay, well, who's going to set it up for your kids? Mm-hmm. Well, who's going to do these things for your children? Who's going to be the homemaker for your husband if you've just been here relying on mom and dad the whole time.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to, one, understand that you're going to have to make a home no matter where you're at, whether you're by yourself or you're with a partner. So you need to know how to do that anyways. But at some point in time, you look for what you want in a person when you start looking. Don't date potential. You date a person for who they are. And like, yeah, eventually, and like, I'm not saying like don't date potential, like don't date somebody who's in school and has a shitty, a bad job, and you don't want to be with somebody with a bad job. No, that's not what I'm saying. Like, don't date potential. I'm not saying you have to go and be with someone who's rich. I'm saying you can see what kind of person someone is from the moment they start going out with you. If they only have $5, do they go and they, buy you a flower, buy you a rose, buy you candy with that $5? Or do they have thousands of dollars and they don't even go and buy you anything that's your favorite? Or they just like, oh, here's $100, go buy whatever you want for yourself. There's a big difference. Don't date for like, oh, he has all this money, he will potentially do things that I like, or is this person gonna just throw money at you and expect you to just do everything yourself? Do you want to be treated like a princess, or do you want to have all the money in the world? Do you can date somebody and be with somebody who you see like, okay, yeah, this person is eventually going to, when they have it, I'm going to help them, I'm going to be there for them, they're going to be my person, and when they get to that point, we're going to move forward together. It doesn't always have to be one thing or another, but if somebody's treating you right, if somebody's opening the door for you, if somebody is talking nice to you, what happens behind closed doors, and that's important. Those are the things that, in my opinion, I think are important, especially for a girl.
That's good. I do think about like the extremes, even things that you mentioned, which were trash, lawnmower, even like physical defense, like this idea of like, I have friends that are discuss very, very seriously their daughters being in jujitsu, so they have this self-defense, right? But it's like, it's kind of track, the boy track is, self-defense, so you can defend yourself and you can defend your family, you can defend your woman. Girl track is also that. It's, again, this is jujitsu. It's the track so you could defend yourself, you could defend your kid if you had a kid or whatever. But then also the track of, okay, but also know how to step back and allow my man to defend, and me not even being engaged in the fight.
Yeah.
Because of again, the threat of all of it. But it seems an interesting way, like doubles, 2 tracks for a woman, 1 track for a man.
Mm-hmm.
Because the idea of teaching a man to be a prince and let everybody wait on you, you never work and you just sit on your castle and let everybody do things for you, like, it's despicable, right? It's like this idea, it's horrific of an idea.
And that's becoming so much more common. Like, I feel like nowadays, that would be one of my fears. Like, for, let's say I had a daughter and she does all these things, like for a man to try to come and like take advantage of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I don't believe in like there being, I do believe in a double standard, so I don't think that it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Especially like, if you've never been pregnant, I really, really think that people downplay it.
Downplay pregnancy?
Yeah. Like, I feel like people think like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But literally, after I had Khalil, I was just starting to get my brain back together. And now I'm pregnant again. Like, I just feel like that's years and years of my life. And like, I feel blessed because I do feel like I wasn't physically changed that much, but like some people develop like diabetes when they're pregnant. Some people have all these problems. Some people get, you end up having to have a C-section, like all these things can happen. And it's like a man is taking absolutely zero risk to his health.
Yeah.
During that process. And I feel like people don't understand how big of a sacrifice that is.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like, I just think that is worth bringing in life, in my opinion. I feel like it's worth not having to do all the same things that men have to do.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the total and complete thoughts I have.
Very good. All right. You're up. Next question or topic you want your sons to be prepared for.
Be prepared. In this one, in the book, actually, let's say like this. They're talking about how when Johnetta, is that her name, right? There's a girl, Johnetta, in the book, and she doesn't come from a good family, and she's trying to move to better herself. And when she's doing that, people are telling her, oh, you're never going to be able to move. And then she moves. And then they tell her, well, you're never going to make it over there. And then she's, doing good. And they're, constantly negative talking, like, negative speaking over her. Like, if you do get over there, you're going to end up coming back.
Yeah.
If you even make it out of here, and I feel like there's always going to be people who don't believe in you. And I think, like, I do think it's super important to believe in yourself, like internally, to feel like you're able to do something. And I cannot express enough how if you do not believe you can do it, there is no chance that anybody else is going to believe that you can. Like, what is it? Like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that's because, like, if you think that you're not going to be able to do something, if you think that it's not going to happen, you just don't go, you just don't move, you just aren't doing anything, it's never going to happen. I feel like so many times it happens with people where they want more, but they're so scared and they're so like engulfed in the idea that, like, oh, nobody believes in me, I can't do it, and they let that bring them down. I think I don't want anybody else's words or anybody else's ideas to impact my kids. Like, I don't want them to put a cap on what they can do and what's possible based on other people. Like, I understand if you do it for yourself. Like, me, myself, I'm never going to, like, let's say, go skydiving, and that's it. That's my cap. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not saying me, because I might, maybe one day. But, like, like saying like that, like, that's what I'm not going to do because I personally don't want to do that. But it's like, I would hate for someone else to come and say, like, oh, you can't do that. And then that mentally puts a block on what potential they're able to have. Anyways. And to say, I think it's just important to have enough self-esteem in yourself. And I think that definitely starts with how you talk to yourself.
Yes.
I think you should always talk to yourself and let yourself know that you are your number one biggest fan. You are always going to be with yourself. You're with yourself way, way more than you're with anybody else, and you will ever be with anybody else in your entire life. So it's like, it's so important for you to be your number one biggest fan, because if you're not, nobody else is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're always your number one biggest fan, so that means if you don't like yourself, everybody else is behind that, Yeah. At least my thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a spot on perspective with the idea. I remember I was at San Antonio College. I had written a paper, and at the time I seemed to have a little bit of discipline in the sense that I would actually go to the writing lab and take a paper I had written so they could take it, modify it, look at it, make it a little bit better, and then I could turn it in. And I remember I did that one day, and then the writing lab assistant accused me of plagiarizing. Like somebody else wrote my paper. And which, there's two things happening at the same time in my head. I'm like, oh, this is actually a really cool compliment. Like, I really did write this. And so she thinks it's so good that I didn't write it. And I was like, well, I did write it. What do you want me to? There's nothing to confess here. There's no problem. I didn't do anything wrong. So all of that meant I was trying to. So then the second thing was like, oh wow, like she could have said so many other positive things as opposed to assuming that I had poor character and I was stealing the the writing stuff. But I think about that is it comes back to this idea of the people you have around you. So you mentioned this idea of believing in yourself, yes, and being mindful of toxic seeds that people are trying to plant in you, in your mind about yourself. I wonder, what if I allowed that woman to shape the way I thought about me as a writer? Oh, I can't write good things. But I remember when I would write certain things and put it on Facebook, and I had just a group of friends that would read and say, man, like, oh, like, why are you writing on Facebook? Like, write books already. And the difference couldn't be more opposite of the writing lab assistant at San Antonio College was like, yeah, you're not good enough to write this. And then I had people on Facebook at the time or Instagram at the time who were saying, you need to put all this stuff in books as opposed to just putting it online. And then, of course, we're able to have, again, books right here in front of me and then hopefully more down the line. But the I would be trying to give to my son is be mindful of people trying to plant seeds, or what we kind of phrase now as core memories. People are going to try to give you experiences that are core memories that will not best suit you. Yeah. And you need to be able to think about it. And it's called reframing. Yeah. The way you look at somebody's perspective. So now I've reframed that the writing lab assistant who was there as she just didn't know any better. She probably was innocent. She probably wasn't trying to discourage me or trying to crush me or anything like that. She probably she probably didn't want me to get in trouble for stealing a paper or whatever. So she wanted to kind of get ahead of that. But so that's the reframe. But not to allow people who are trying to plant toxic seeds of doubt or of less than inside, and be mindful of that and plant better seeds of reasons to believe in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. My thoughts even like, you know, you've heard the term like take everything with a grain of salt. So I think about that all the time too. Like sometimes when people are saying things like, and anytime like as sweet as somebody says sounds, you have to take everything that people say with a grain of salt. I think it can be the same thing. Like you can take every sour thing that people say with a grain of sugar, you know? So like even the negative things that people tell you, like I think there's always a way to, instead of constantly taking it all in, like, oh, so all the negativity and feel bad about it. Like you said, you know, you can take almost anything that people say and try to put it into a negative light. And I've seen people do that. Where like even you're trying to say like, oh man, like I see like you're looking real healthy, you're looking good. Like, oh, was I looking sick? Was I looking sick before? Mm-hmm. Do you think I looked like, okay, all I'm saying is that you look good, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like I've seen people do that so many times, like they can't help but take everything you tell them and automatically take it like a dagger, like you're attacking them. Yeah. And it's like, okay, it's just like how you say, it's your frame of reference. Do you want to constantly, you're the only person who gets affected by the way you take things. So if you're taking everything personal, if every single person that cuts you off in traffic, you're thinking that that's at you, and now you're super angry, and now you're in a bad mood, and you were cut off 3 times before you get to work. Now you get to work and your whole day is ruined. Or you're even like, I think if you waste even 5 minutes being angry at something that's out of your control, instead of telling yourself, oh, maybe there's an emergency at home and there's a fire and they need to hurry up and get home and that's why they did that. Maybe their child just called them crying and the babysitter's being mean to them and they need to hurry up and get home, you know? And you let yourself like take in the things that happen to you, take in the things that people say to you, and be more I'd hope that people have as much grace as I do when I'm the one who's doing those things or when I'm the one in that situation. And it's like all those are things that you make those decisions yourself. If you want to have a frame of reference that, yes, I see that, I'm going to give people compassion so that I get compassion. You feel those things when it's you in that situation. Like, not everybody's trying to. And I feel like if you're the kind of person who's negative and mean and rude all the time, then when you're in the situation where you have an emergency and you're doing stuff, you feel like everybody on the road hates you. Now you have an emergency. Everybody on the road hates you. You're feeling horrible. And it just makes everything, stack on top of itself, And I think that can apply to so many other things.
Yes.
That it is super important to just constantly try to take sour things with a grain of sugar. And yes, sweet things with a grain of salt, but
Yes.
That's where I'm at.
Yes, I do want to share on that one. Yeah, so if my kid asked, like, what's the best way to think through watching somebody do bad things or do a bad thing? And you mentioned cutting you off in traffic. What's the most mature way to think about seeing somebody make bad decisions in their life? It could be like when you walk through life, you're going to have so many examples. There are so many cautionary tales, things that other people are doing that you should not do. You'll like, if you walk through life enough, you'll know somebody who was unfaithful to their spouse. You'll know somebody who did something that ended up getting them locked up and going to prison. You'll know somebody who cheated on a test. You'll know somebody who cheated on their taxes. You'll know somebody who got fired from a job. And so all of these things, you'll know somebody that was abusive to somebody else, that physically assaulted somebody. And unfortunately, the more you go through life, the more you just know different people. And especially if you're social and you're meeting different people, you're interacting. So what's the best way to think about those things? There's one perspective that I think is more toxic, which is you almost, and we have so many different idioms. We talk about being on a high horse or ivory castle or ivory tower, all of these things. And these ideas paint the picture of you can so easily look down on other people based on what they're doing. And what's helped me over the years, and probably even more recently, even like most like this past year, I've been asking myself, let's say somebody does something stupid, whether it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be abuse, or whatever it is. I've been asking myself, if I had their exact same circumstances, if I was in their exact same position, if I had their exact same parenting, if I had their exact same friends, if I had their exact same schooling, if I had their exact same brain, if I had their exact same every single thing, could I guarantee that I would be better than them? And I would have done things better, made better choices, been superior. And most of the time I'm going, no, I couldn't guarantee it. And that's been something that's been helpful for me to be more understanding, more sympathetic, more empathetic with people, as opposed to judging and saying, man, like I would have done so much better. It's going, I could understand if I was in their similar situations and circumstances that I would do something similarly as stupid. Now, that doesn't mean we don't call a spade and call wrong a wrong, call stupid stupid. No, stupid things are still stupid things, regardless if you can understand it or not. So I think it's and both. You can have a realistic, sober perspective on some kind of action or some kind of deed that's dumb, stupid, that's pathetic, or sometimes I'll call it scumbag behavior. Let's call things what they are. If there's somebody's abusing their spouse in their marriage, that's scumbag behavior. Or somebody's unfaithful to their spouse in their marriage, it's scumbag behavior. Or somebody's abandoning their kids, scumbag behavior. Let's call things what they are and not be afraid of like, oh no, you're insensitive calling it a scumbag. Okay, again, respect somebody else's opinion. That's my perspective. Let's call scumbag behavior, but let's also not pretend that we also haven't committed scumbag behavior. And if I raise my kids right, hopefully there won't be a lot of scumbag behavior that happens in their teens, but it's probably going to come eventually. And the idea is, yeah, you want to avoid some of those extremes. Sometimes when people grow up in Christian households, so much of their scumbag-ishness, or whatever you want to call it, is all internal. Like, oh, they didn't maybe sleep around with a bunch of girls, or they didn't do a bunch of drugs, and again, depending on who they are and how they what they went through. So much of their battles are being arrogant, thinking so high of themselves and looking down on all of the bad people in life. So they raised very, very sheltered, very, very protected. And then so much of their battles are internal as opposed to the external, which is a whole different thing. It's another kind of demon to fight when it's arrogance, when it's self-righteousness, when it's me above them, and it's a different kind of battle. So anyway, all that to say is that's what's been helping me most recently. So it's no matter who it is, I've been asking myself, could I guarantee I could have done it better with their same circumstances? The answer is no. And if that's the case, let me be understanding, while still being able to label scumbag behavior. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. My thoughts. I do think it is important to, one, have those labels, like, what you think is a scummy behavior, scumbag behavior, just like any kind of thing. You have to have a frame of reference for all kinds of things, and yeah, you don't want to be constantly thinking that you're better than somebody else, or that I am super strict about, I try not to say oh, I would never do that, or I can't believe that person is doing that, or be overly judgmental, because one thing growing up that I always remember mom saying is that when you're judging other people, or when you're constantly saying you don't understand why someone else made a decision, God tends to put you in positions where you will understand, because you'll understand from experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's proven to be true time and time again. Mom's 62 years old, and she said every time she's heard someone say, I can't believe that, she would hear younger people say, I can't believe she's a single mom and she's not, she didn't stay with her husband. And then she sees 10, 20 years down the line, this person is a single mom, doesn't have a husband. And she's those are the kinds of things that happen when you're judging other people, when you're negative about what's going on with other people.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand, yes, some things are bad. Yes, some things aren't. You can label those things I don't want to do these things, but you don't have to say I would never do that. Putting yourself above somebody else, I feel opens you for the opportunity of being taught a lesson on how those things can happen to you.
Yes.
Anyways, that's just my personal thoughts about that.
That's
you
good.
might think you can judge and tell everybody, I'm never going to be that, I'm never going to do that, and you're going to be perfectly fine. But I just don't think that that's something that is completely good to do.
Yes, and it tie two concepts that we were discussing here, which was one, that what goes around comes around. Sometimes we think about that is I could cheat on my spouse and then nobody doesn't cheat on me, but then I get cheated on. So that's one version of it. The other version of it is what you just described. And sometimes it's this, we become judgmental, and God put us in a position, as you said, where you're on the other side of the equation. You go, oh, this is what this is like. This is different than I expected. And
you have a lot more compassion for yourself than you did for the person you were judging initially also.
Right. And to tie it into comparison, it's kind of interesting too, because I find one of my chief character flaws, again, if I was describing to my son why I'm not a good person, then there's so much envy, so much lust. And there's a reason I'm not somebody who can be on social media very much, because there's there's another, sexual advertisement, sexual post. I'm just not one of those people who can be on. And then, so if it's not that, then it's the other version, which is, so there's three different areas that make it really difficult for me to be on, even, social media casually. It's only sports. And even that, sometimes it's that was weird too. But the idea of knowing myself enough so that I can tell there's problems with lust for me being on. There's problems with envy with being on back to the comparison. There's problems with worry. So it's like this. If it's not sexual, if there's anything sexual posted, or again, a woman dressed attractively, she doesn't even have to be necessarily revealing, but that could just be a struggle. Then it's lust. If somebody's talking about something good in their life, it's envy. If somebody's talking about something bad in their life, they're making bad decisions, it's worry. So then it's like lust, envy, worry, lust, envy, worry. Like, let's say if I took out all of the content that appealed to all the three of those things, like what would you really have? I don't know, basketball highlights. I don't have any envy toward that. But then sometimes basketball has to overlap with like some whatever their girlfriends or basketball related girlfriends or whatever, and it's like, okay, why is this posted in this basketball related content? All of that to say is back to this comparison.
Yeah.
You were describing the idea of being put in those situations. So I find so along the way, I've seen other people had more success in an area of life, and then flash forward 5-10 years, I've seen their life fall apart. And I've asked myself, and it's one of the saddest moments, because I was like, instead of spending those moments of envy, right? It's like envy and jealousy. We'll put those kind of categorically very similar, overlapping concepts. Instead of sitting in my envy or jealousy, I could have been just praying for them, that they'd be protected, that they would be blessed, and God would help them. But it's happened too many times, so many times I couldn't even count. So if my kid was asking, hey, like, how do you, if my kid was saying, I'm struggling with jealousy, I'm struggling with envy, how do you navigate like these things? And I was like, I don't know if there's a way for you to avoid it, but if you can, anytime you think about being envious or jealous, like pray for that person to do really well in life, and God would protect him, protect him from Satan, protect him from darkness, and that they would be able to move forward with life with maturity and grace, because it's the saddest thing to soberly watch somebody and be envious about them and then see them destroy their life and go, man, it felt like darkness was working on me with envy, and darkness was working on them and destroying their life. And it could have just been something good. I let the envy lead me to prayer for the person.
Yeah.
And maybe encouragement to the person.
Yeah. 100%.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'm good. I don't want to bring any more to the table.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Next
Also,
week, we have the law of reflection. Not the mirror reflection, but it's learning to pause allows growth to catch up with you. Anyway, if you're listening, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast. So what I'll just ask you is, are there any questions you think about that you'd want to be prepared to answer for your kids? And maybe you're already an adult, you already have adult kids, and maybe it's what are some topics or things that you'd want to prepare your nieces and nephews or your grandkids? And if you're somebody who doesn't have kids, you're like, okay, maybe I won't have any. What are topics you'd want to prepare the next generation for? Anyway, so that's what we'll be thinking of as we move forward with the pod, is different topics and things of what we can give to our kids, so that if they ask, they'll know the answers from their parents.
yeah.
Anything else, Aimee?
That's it.
All right, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.